So let's start with, and this probably has a lot to do with it, prioritizing self-care in your life and what that looks like for you.
It's a great question, and one in which I actually didn't start doing and prioritizing until relatively recently. And that actually does, as you mentioned, tie directly into my journey into FemTech. So not to go too far back, but I was actually, I don't want to date myself, right? But 5 to 10 years ago, I was working at a large law firm in Washington, D.C., right? Doing all of the fun law work, making that, 6-figure salary that everybody covets. And I had been going ever since college. So no breaks. I did college in 3 years. I did law school in 2.5. I went straight into working full time while studying for the bar, working at different large law firms. And I always put my health last. And so I was stress eating. I had a ton of stress as an attorney in that environment. I was not prioritizing my own health. And it was very interesting, right? Because I am an attorney in the health law field. And yet, in 2021, I got diagnosed with a large pelvic tumor very unexpectedly during a routine annual exam. Wow. And I then had to transition into navigating that journey as a patient. And I had heard about FemTech before that, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But during that time, I was navigating the telemedicine field. I was having to talk to doctors at Mayo Clinic because my tumors were so large. And thankfully, they were benign and they were fibroids, but they were so large that I was the equivalent of 6 months pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
Right? The bad eating choices, they were crushing some of my internal organs. And so as I went on that journey, I thought, I have neglected myself in pursuit of work for far too long. And that's how I got to this place. So I have to prioritize self-care now. And B, I was so appalled by the lack of innovation in women's healthcare as I went through that journey. And I asked about those options. I'll give you an example. My doctor had said, 80% of women are going to have fibroids at some point in their life. And I said, oh, that's an interesting statistic. Okay, where's the pill? Like, what do I take for this to get rid of these? And she looked at me and kind of laughed and she's like, no, your only option is surgery. And I ended up having a 7-hour surgery, which is longer than, a heart replacement surgery.
Yeah.
And so I was just appalled. I thought, if 80% of men had tumors on their reproductive organs, there would be a pill for this. And
there would be something.
Exactly. So that catapulted me to say, I'm making a change and I'm dedicating myself full time to FemTech.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a couple of things there. One, we as a culture celebrate the fact that, oh my gosh, Bethany's so cool. She did college in 3 years and she did med school in 2.5. And now she's doing, or law school in 2.5. And now she's doing this. And we celebrate that instead of saying, baby, you need to slow down. You're going to knock yourself out. As a culture, we're celebrating the wrong things. And so we feel like so accomplished when we do this as we're running ourselves into the ground. And the irony is you're working in the healthcare industry as a legal firm. My brother is a cardiac nurse practitioner, and he talks about all the time how the people that he works with and the people that he works around are some of the most unhealthy people because their hours are wild. Their eating habits are terrible because their hours are wild. Their sleep's terrible because their hours are wild. And so there's all these ironies of things running into each other with this. So even the fact, I think we have to talk about that first. Second, tell us what you mean when you say FemTech. Because I'm sure there's women out here going, I don't know what she's talking about.
And you're not alone, right? There was a recent study that showed about 80% of women have no idea what this industry is, even though it's being built for them.
So, yes, exactly.
So FemTech really stands for female health technology. And it's interesting, there's actually not a universally agreed upon definition for this term yet. It's something that we're working with cross global organizations to actually build a common definition for. But basically, it's any type of technology that impacts women's health specifically or in a way that's different than men's health. So for instance, some of the things that you're probably familiar with, right? period tracking apps, ovulation tracking apps, right? Fertility tracking apps. Now we're seeing a lot more come on into the menopause space. So there's like menopause telehealth care, right? There's that new Ember that kind of cools your hot flashes down. We're starting to see things come up also in uterine and breast care. But we haven't really seen yet kind of the transition into longevity and longer term care and chronic conditions. That's been slower to be embraced. But really that's what we're talking about. And it's interesting, right? Not a lot of people have heard about this. There's a couple different reasons for that. The first is this term was not even coined until 2016.
Wow.
So pretty recent. It was coined by Ida Tin, who is the founder of Clue, which is one of the largest period tracking apps out there. People probably know about it. Some other big names you've probably heard in this field are right, Maven Clinic, Kindbody, Low, Flow, Thinks, those types of companies that are really focused on women's health. And the other reason you probably don't know about it is we're censored. So women's health is censored extremely on social media platforms and on the internet. So if you talk to any founder in the FemTech field, 100% of them say they have had their content blocked, their ads blocked, their accounts disabled. And it's not because they're posting inappropriate content. They are posting anatomically correct content, talking about women's health, talking about endometriosis, PCOS, right? Menopause. And those get banned. And yet you can talk about erectile dysfunction all you want, and that's fine on those social media channels.
Yeah, you got to tell your 8-year-old what erectile dysfunction is when it comes across the TV at 8 o'clock in the evening, but you can't say vagina or show a picture of a uterus. I mean, where that said child came out of, by the way. I mean, it's just wild to me, but that's why I started this around like, we got to take all these stigmas around all these conversations around women's health because it's costing us our health, because we're told there's so much secretive and shame and I can't talk about it here. It's not safe for me here. All these things it's just, you have two different ideals for men and women in this space. And it's just, it's not okay. So going back to, give me some examples for breast health, let's say. What are some things in the FemTech? Are you talking like mammograms and those and ultrasounds? Or are you talking about newer things?
Newer things, right? So for instance, one of the things there's a couple that come to mind. One is it's not available for consumers yet, but it's available for doctors. It's actually a tool that doctors can use during your annual exam and give you that self-breast exam. But it looks through using AI, looks through the dense tissue and is able to give the doctor an AI generated report that suggests, okay, yeah, we found something that's abnormal. We think this person needs to go for a mammogram now. Or nope, we think there's a 99% chance this person is fine. So that's kind of an example on the breast side. Another is, and it doesn't really use tech, but it was something that just kind of came out and hasn't gotten a lot of attention. So I do want to mention it. There's actually a company that has a layer that you can put on your breast when you're doing your self-breast exam, and it makes it so that you can more easily feel the lumps. So it's really cool that way. You can buy that on Amazon. So we're starting to see things like that come out.
Sure.
A lot of them use or are trying to implement AI into that technology. Deep Look, for instance, I think is one as well. They do have a really cool imaging thing that they have that looks through the dense breast tissue and is trying to reduce the number of unnecessary biopsies that women go through. So those are some of the really cool companies that we've started to see innovate. And the company that has kind of that that handheld breast exam tool that you can use, they're trying to get one FDA cleared for consumers. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed on that.
Absolutely. I think that's right. As a woman with dense breast and as a woman who had a biopsy I didn't need because it ended up being a cyst. But then I ended up dealing with breast cysts. And this is a whole other conversation because no one told me what perimenopause, whole 9 yards. That's a different conversation. So many things that happen in women's health. I didn't know what perimenopause was until it was in or after I was in it. I had an ablation, so I didn't have periods, which was great, but no one told me, watch out for these other things in your estrogen level rising, such as breast cysts. No one had those conversations with me. And so I'm like, okay, what else do we need to know? Because as a woman with dense breasts, if I don't have to have the mammogram every year, if there's another tool that saves me from having to do that, I can just go to my doctor, have the exam, and they can tell me, you're good, or let's go check this out. And maybe you check it out via ultrasound rather than mammogram. I mean, who knows? But just opening up those opportunities. But I talk about all these things because I want women to know to ask. I want you to know to ask. And then if you're a practitioner, I want you to know that that's out there. So you can start like, are we going to have this in my clinic? Or is this, something, when is the FDA going to approve this? Because all these things are necessary to get these in the hands of the people that need them.
And that's absolutely right. And, it's actually mind-boggling the number of clinicians who have also never heard of FemTech.
Wow.
It's interesting because you would think, right, this is an industry that's focused on women's health. We have to have clinicians involved. And there is, I will mention, a bit of a divide between the tech founders who are creating these products and the clinicians who are wondering, are these clinically accurate and clinically usable, especially in today's realm where we're dealing with wearables and collecting mass amounts of data on ourselves. So that's something that we're really working on FemInnovation, is really connecting clinicians with tech founders to get them more knowledgeable about what's out there and how they can work together so that we do have this clinically relevant products that women can use and that their doctors actually know about. And I can't tell you how many times people come to me and they say, I asked my doctor about XYZ female health product, and my doctor's like, huh? What is that? And they've never heard of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it seems like with women's health, there's always these question marks. Is that necessary? And always like trying to cast doubt on these things because they're unfamiliar or they're new, instead of, and I think you got to get your practitioners involved because they can inform on the tech side of like, okay, this is going to help this, but work together. Let's create partnerships so you can give each other the information needed to get these things out there and available. So I wanted to ask this under the guise of self-care, because this is all part of our self-care. This is all part of how we take care of ourselves, by asking the questions, by pushing the narratives, by challenging the stereotypes and the old stories that are out there, and being innovative in this. And yes, of course, we'll learn and we'll improve. That's always the truth. But let's start doing that, and let's come together and do that on both sides, and make sure everybody knows about it, so we can get these things in the hands and have the help we need, and take away the unnecessary things. I think right now we're stuck in some old systems that also have some unnecessary things that can cause a lot of stress.
Absolutely.
And we've already talked about some of those, of the unnecessary biopsies, and do I need a mammogram every year? There's this other tool. Now, I'm not telling you right now, don't do those things now. Make sure you're healthy. Use what's available. I'm not discouraging that, but also ask about the new things and bring up with your practitioner. Have you heard about FemTech? What are your thoughts on it? Have you thought about getting involved with that? So these other better mechanisms, we can't have too many tools. Everybody's bodies are so unique. I just think the more things we have in our toolbox to use as practitioners, as people that are advocating for health, and as women ourselves, I think it's so valuable. So thank you for sort of staying with me on that. But I wanted to get that information out there and be informed by, these are the kinds of things to pay attention to ask about on your appointments, or if you're a practitioner, get into it, find out about how can I get involved to make sure it's done in a way that I can use in the future on my patients. So thank you for that. I appreciate that so much. Talk to me about this, and this will go back a lot to, I would guess, to say you probably didn't have many of these, but confidently setting boundaries when you were on this, road race through college and law school and your career in DC and all the stress and where that journey has taken you.
Yeah, absolutely. Boundaries are hard, I will say. The one thing that I did learn very early in my career was that nobody was going to set those boundaries for you. And so if you didn't have them, they weren't going to be there.
Sure.
And I learned that very early. And so one of the first things that I did was I made sure that I used 100% of my vacation time, because I wasn't going to use it. Nobody's going to tell me, hey, Bethany, I think you should take a vacation, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah.
It's up to me to moderate that and get what I need. And for me, right, for somebody who is a self-proclaimed workaholic, getting away, right, getting out of the country, going somewhere physically for a 1 or 2 week period at a time was what I learned I needed in order to completely unplug from work. Those you take a day off here and there wasn't really going to work for me because I would just keep thinking about the work I would be doing the next day. And I would inevitably end up working that day anyway. So I actually, I ended up requesting 2 weeks off. That was one of the things I would negotiate with employers every time I took a new job. I said, I want a minimum of 4 to 6 weeks that I get off. And I want to be able to take 1 2-week vacation at a time. So that way I can fully unwind and relax. I never had a problem with that. Everyone was always understanding of that. And they knew that I was a hard worker. So that was really the thing that I did for my setting boundaries, was making sure that I took that vacation time. The other thing that I have really tried to do more recently than before is I try not to answer emails after 5 p.m. It's not that I'm not looking at them, right? It's not that I'm not looking and seeing if something is urgent, but I have to actually tell myself, you don't have to respond to that right this second. That can wait until tomorrow morning. And that's more me controlling myself with my own boundaries, which is hard, right? Nobody's telling me I've got to answer that email right now, but I feel compelled to. And so I'm trying to retrain myself that way.
Yeah. And those are two very important things. I love that you brought up the vacation thing. And I love that you brought up that you negotiated that up front. If the answer is no, that is not an organization you want to be working for. Don't put yourself through it. That is a sign right there that boundaries and your health are not a concern of others. They're just there to get out of you what they can from a job standpoint. And so that's really smart. Even as you were navigating all these other things that you did that up front, that's a great takeaway. And also too, that 5 o'clock. And I think when we're in a scenario these days, especially since COVID, where so many of us are working from home. And having to learn how to create, okay, now I'm home. I am not, this is not my workspace anymore. This is now my home. And I know for me, I initially worked at home for 15 months. I had to go outside my house, go for a walk around the block, go for a drive around the block. It's physically, I did the car for a while to physically make my brain think that I had left for work and came back from work and to just kind of do that. So doing those things, but shutting it off. I mean, now I've got a separate space where it's my laptop is in there now. My work email is shut down and I'm done with that for the night. And it will all be there for the morning. And there's nothing that's going to happen between now and then that can't wait until tomorrow. It's easier said than done. Obviously, there's times if there's different deadlines where I'm breaking my own rules. But if you don't set that, make it a priority and make that just like this and put it in your schedule almost, then it's really easy to let that slip away. But thank you for those. Those are really good. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health, our emotional, mental, physical health. You have the outcome of what happens when you don't make space and time to take care of yourself and the physical manifestations of stress on our bodies. So talk to me about that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two experiences I can share. One we've talked a little bit about, but I'll talk some more about. The first was, as I mentioned, right? I went through college. I went through law school fast. I worked full time for a judge while I was studying for the bar exam. And then I launched right into my first big law job in Charlotte. And it's funny, right? Somewhere along that journey, and it's very easy to do, you lose your passion and your motivation and your drive for why you originally went into an industry in exchange for money. Yeah. And so, right, I had gotten a large law firm job right out of law school. It's every lawyer's, quote unquote dream. And so I thought, what, I'll put my passions aside, the things I'm really interested in, and I will work at this firm and get a good salary. And I did that. And I worked, and you're lowest on the ladder, right? So you're working that 2,200 billable hours a year. Yeah. And I burned out. Yeah. And it was a very traumatic experience because I had no idea really what was happening. I had worked all the holidays. And it was interesting around March or so, I just burned out so badly that when an email would pop up on my phone, I would panic and I couldn't answer it and I couldn't form those thoughts. And I ended up having to go to a therapist who said, get out of your job right now because you are in full burnout mode. And it took 6 months of recovery to actually be a functioning human again, just from that burnout and that stress.
Wow.
And so after that, that was kind of exhibit one for I need to be changing my life around, right?
Yeah.
And did I listen like so many people? No.
I know. Of course not.
Right? Of course not. I went and I clerked for a judge in DC. I went and worked at the DC law firm, was loving it, but was doing a lot of work, 24-hour days, quite frequently. And then I had that annual exam, which was very unexpected. And the doctor telling me I had that pelvic mass, and my world kind of stopped. And I started to think, really, how did I get here? It was all of that self-neglect over all of that those long years, right? I didn't get there overnight. Right. And like so many women, I dismissed my own symptoms.
That was my next question.
Yeah, I was getting full, right? I was eating, but I was getting full because I had this huge tumor. But I thought, oh, okay. My stomach just doesn't want any more food. I was having to go to the restroom at night, and I thought, I'm just getting older, which is not normal for somebody my age, apparently.
Right. And so you're too young for that. That's common, but you're too young for that.
Like so many women, I dismissed my own symptoms, and I never thought about it. And even when I would feel it, so I would lay on my stomach and I would be doing ab exercises, and I felt something in there. It was so large, and I thought, oh, maybe it's just a hernia. Right? Never thinking there is something actually wrong with me and I should get this checked out. Wow. So all of that self-neglect over all of that time period really, really led me to ignore my own body's cues. I was, for instance, as my stomach was getting bigger and I was getting more stretch marks, I thought I was just getting fat. And so I was blaming myself, and I said, stop eating, right? You've got to exercise more. And I couldn't figure out why my body was doing this to me. And it turned out I was doing it to my body. And so I missed that entire connection when I didn't listen and when I neglected myself.
You said so important. That's the first thing we do. What's my body doing to me? And you're like, oh no, it's my body I did this to myself. My body's been screaming at me for attention. And it's so interesting because we are the first ones to tell everybody else to go to the doctor. Our girlfriends, our coworkers, our partners, our siblings, our parents, our kids, whatever. But we don't do that with ourselves. And our bodies know. But we've got to be mindful. We've got to listen. We've got to pay attention. We've got to take care of them. So thank you for sharing that and your vulnerability of that, because we go through this time and time again. And this happened to you when you were young. So also don't think, 20 and 30 somethings fresh out of college and grad school and dental school and law school, that you spared this. If you don't take care of yourself, it's going to come up, and it doesn't necessarily wait until you're middle aged to do it. So also, and put those practices in place now, but thank you for that. They're connected. They're just connected. And we've got to talk about it, and we've got to make space, and there's got to be safe space to talk about it. I mean, DC it's the epicenter of the world in terms of all of these things that are happening and making a difference and whatnot. However, it's also the epicenter for people not taking care of themselves. And, and just imagine if we ran the world with a bunch of people with healthy boundaries. and their practices and in a recognition of the need to fill your cup. I think some better decisions might be made along the way. I don't know. I mean, if we started there, it could be so much better. So, all those things collide. But yeah, I was really curious. I'm like, I wonder. And then you brought it up because that was going to be were you in pain? And then you brought it up. Yeah, we do that all the time. But that happens when we're not present. We live in autopilot and go mode, and we don't stop to be mindful and feel and sit quiet. For 5 minutes, so yeah, that's not what the culture has drilled into us. So thank you for that. I appreciate that so much. You do this work in FemTech is exhibit A of doing this, but how we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically.
Yeah. One of the things that I would absolutely say is if you're interested in something, go for it. Because, FemTech was not a thing when I went to law school. It had not been coined. It was not an industry. And I can tell you, if I didn't take that risk in order to leap into this field, I would still probably be in big law, right? Wondering, okay, when's my next tumor coming? Not taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing I would say is if something is capturing your interest and you feel drawn to it, explore it. The worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work out, but you've probably learned some new skill sets or knowledge in the interim that's going to make you even more valuable to employers, even if you have to pivot back. And that was hard for me. When I first took that leap out of big law, I took a third of my salary for my next position that I ended up going into. And that was a really scary choice to make. And what helped me get through that was thinking about, all the fear that I had whenever I went through my surgical procedure with my fibroids and trying to think about what that taught me. What was that experience trying to teach me? Because it wasn't just, okay, cool, right? You've neglected yourself. Here's this terrible experience. Now go back to what you were doing. Yeah. And I fully believe if I had done that, I would probably be back in the surgical office very soon.
Absolutely.
So really trying to figure out what was my purpose in life, where could I make a difference, and how did that experience uniquely shape me in order to be able to help somebody else. And so that for me is what led me to take that actual leap, take a third of my salary, dive into this field. And I can tell you, in the course of 1 to 2 years, I've become a thought leader in that field because I've been so passionate about it, because I've wanted to help so many founders get their products out there and teach others about this space. And I don't look back at all. So I would say, don't be afraid to make the leap. And if you have a friend, right, or a colleague who's thinking about making that leap, be a source of support for them because it's so hard, but your support can make the difference between whether they choose to do it and whether they don't. And I can say, for me, having my parents' support was crucial because they're some of my best advocates. And for them to say, go take this opportunity, right? It's not going to be the end all if it doesn't work out. That's what led me to live unapologetically this way.
No, I love this. And you support other women in doing that now. Now you're part of bringing products that help them ask those questions and enhance their health, but you also have your own health experiences. But I think something too that's very interesting is these industries, like you see with the big legal firms, the big banking firms, the big accounting firms, all the medical firms, all these things, these big corporations, they pay all this money to bring people in, and they hope that that's their ace in the hole to not lose people. And it's by us making this no, I need more. This is not enough. This money is not covering the fact that I'm not taking care of my body. My quality of life is crap. And I'm minimizing the years on my life because if I don't start taking care of myself by doing this, and that's how you change narratives in those fields too. It's no, I'm walking away from this space and I'm going to go do this thing that's healthier and better for me. But it's also very important. You mentioned you had a support system around you. You also knew that you had great skills to fall back on. But you follow your body and your knowing and your values will inform you on the direction you need to go. And it's just and it can be scary. I mean, I think the one thing that helps too is I'm sure it's probably what your parents were thinking too. I'm a parent of 3 20-somethings, one almost 30. And, it's do these things now. Go take that chance. Go seize that opportunity. It may not come again. And this is your...
It doesn't get easier to do it.
No, it doesn't. And so having that support too, I think is so important. So if you're someone that doesn't have that support, that can be really tricky. So I love how you spoke up. Be that person to that friend, that coworker, that person who maybe doesn't have those voices in their life. You can be that person and help them to live out, this unapologetically. You don't have to apologize to anyone for taking a different step or going down a different road to follow what is going to be something that you need to see through and that's going to possibly be best for your health. So important. That you so much for that. Coming back to your why and your values and everything you do. That's something you listen to, you cued into that why and that values piece. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was one of those people who always thought that I was going to be a doctor. And I went to college and I realized I was actually terrible at math and science. Like this kind of person you do not want to be your doctor.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a rude awakening call, right? I was like, oh, gee, where am I going to pivot? And I can tell you each life experience that I had ultimately led to my why and my values and where I am today. The first was my mother. So when I was about 7 years old, she had a condition that doctors couldn't identify. And she would collapse to the ground. She wouldn't be able to move. And it took us 8 years and a trip to Mayo Clinic to actually get a diagnosis. And so I have been a caregiver ever since that time for my mother. And that was my first entry into the healthcare field. And my first experience with doctors saying it's in her head, right? We don't know what it is. So clearly it's just in our head, the useless medical test that led to no answer. So that was the first, kind of hint that healthcare was something that could be of interest to me.
Yeah.
Then I went to college, right? I thought I was going to be a doctor. That totally fell through. And I was actually unexpectedly the victim of domestic violence in college. Yeah. And so that is what propelled me into law school, into wanting to help other women and make sure that they didn't have the same experiences that I did. Yeah. Then, as I mentioned, right, you kind of lose that along the way whenever you get seduced by corporations and money. Happened to me, right?
You said that you lose sight, you forget, you're so wiped out, you're so exhausted, you lose your way.
Right. You lose your way. And then I had my health issue, right? And that it was just kind of the culmination of my why and saying, okay, I've had 2 or 3 different experiences here. They've been in healthcare, right? Or they've been in the legal field or, something to do with being a woman and being in a position of not having power. How can I influence that and make that change? And that really brought me to my why of saying, I want to help women. I want to get knowledge out there for them. I want to make sure I'm helping founders get their products to market faster and in a way that's going to be clinically usable. And that's a way I can make a difference with my skill set because I'm not a doctor, but I can still influence the healthcare industry. And then in terms of values, really, it's interesting that you mentioned that because as a lawyer, right, we have, I'm going to say it, high fees, no secret there. But what I would see time and again was we were turning away female founders at the early stages who didn't have sufficient funds to cover the fees. And we'd say, great, come back in a year or so. They would come back and we'd say, okay, great, you got money now, but here's 10 things you did wrong in the interim, and it's going to cost you 10 times now to fix it. And that to me was so counterproductive, and I felt like women were being taken advantage of. And so what I really wanted to be, and one of my core values, was a way to give back and to give those resources to other women without them having to pay an arm and a leg for it. And honestly, that's really what led me to kind of step away and form FemInnovation so we could have that community and those dialogues and get women to the level of their male counterparts, especially in the startup world. Yeah. So in terms of values, it was all about giving back, making sure that we're elevating and amplifying other women in this space to get their products to market, and making sure that we're really trying to do something that's going to be meaningful and impactful, not just for us, right, but for the future generations, and breaking down those stigmas and taboos in a way that we can facilitate hard conversations that people aren't having today, but that could really have an impact down the line on their health and their well-being.
Yeah. And the health and well-being of everybody around them that they're involved with. I mean, this is such a broad, which is always so interesting to me when we run into these walls as women in our health. I'm like, y'all benefit. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. I mean, it's just so wild to me how we get there. So thank you for that. I love that background. I love how you filled that in and how you were able to connect the dots, that take those strengths you have and apply them and find that way. But all those stepping stones that you went through that kind of got you to that point, you were able to draw all those conclusions and bring those together. How did you know about FemTech? Like, how did you even know that was a thing?
Yeah, it's funny. So in between my couple of law firm jobs, I actually did a stint as a law professor. Okay. And so I was a law professor. I was doing some research for some scholarship on a totally unrelated topic. And for the first time ever, the term FemTech came up. And that was around 2018 when that happened. So it had only been out for about 2 years. And I thought to myself, gee, nobody is talking about this.
No.
This is a really cool concept. Nobody in law is talking about it. There's no resources out there. And so I started to dig in a bit deeper. I started to write papers and do conferences on it. And I thought, this is phenomenal. We need to get this out there.
Yeah.
And so, here we are several years later. I will say that FemTech has gotten more interest, right? We've hit, the $1 billion funding mark back in 2021. So we are getting bigger. There's about 2,000 FemTech companies out there, about 2,000 venture capital and angel investors investing in this space. We've got, a couple dozen communities out there, a couple podcasts, right? So we're getting there.
Yeah.
But still, we're not there. I mean, if you compare it to 2018, right, there's so many more resources out there. And yet this is something still that 80% of women don't know about. So I was very thankful I stumbled across that term when I did.
Sure.
But it was so happenstance.
Yeah. But I would say also meant to be. I mean, that was your calling card to respond to. And also too, like the more we got to get it in the hands of more people knowing about it, because that's how you move things along. Like getting more voices involved, making more people aware, having people ask people that they think should know, but don't know. I mean, all those things play a role in that. So thank you for that. That's really, really important. Living out of your own expectations versus others. I'm sure, especially as you navigate this, you make this change, navigating the expectations piece. I mean, we talked about earlier, I'm sure the culture in general is probably, oh, rah, rah, look at Bethany just charging through walls and doing all these things and, such a quick time. Yay, yay, yay. And so, you're like, all of a sudden you're like living up to exceeding probably many expectations. So talk to me about your expectations journey. You've gotten to a space now where I feel like you're really living out of your own.
It's funny you mentioned that, because for so much of my life, I felt like I was trying to meet others' expectations of what I should be as an attorney. And truthfully, that's what I felt the entire time I was in big law. This is the prescribed journey. This is what they teach you in law school, is the ultimate journey, right? You go for your on-campus interview, you get that summer internship or associate position, right? You go back to school, you work for them another summer, and then they give you a job offer and you have a 6-figure salary and you're set. And anything less than that was seen to me as something lesser, right? And I hate to say that now, but that is the perception that I came out of law school with. And so as somebody who, quote unquote, had met everyone's expectations, right, had done and gotten the highest of what I considered the high, I was really, in my opinion, living up to others' expectations. What they don't tell you is that I hated it, right? It was killing me on the inside and I was so unhappy doing it. But yet I kept doing it for 6-7 years because that's what I thought I should be doing. I wanted others to look at me and say, yeah, that's somebody who is successful. That's somebody who has got it made. And I also wanted the financial security. Yeah. And so for me, when I made that leap into FemTech, I actually had a really hard time grappling with that because I had to leave behind the thought that people would think I was successful and that I had met everyone's expectations. And now I was throwing it all away to try something new, to go to a small firm, which, you think, okay, that's where maybe the bottom half of attorneys go. It's not true. It's not true. A lot of good attorneys and partners leave large firms to go to smaller firms. Yeah. But at that point in time, I thought, wow, I'm taking a step down. How are people going to think about me? I could be partner, right? It's next in line for partnership at my firm. What is going to happen, right? People are going to think Bethany is being an idiot, right?
Yeah.
And what really helped me when dealing with others' expectations was to take the ego out of it. Yeah. And say, if I take my ego and I put it aside, is this the right choice for me? Do I care what other people are going to say if I do this? And when I did that, I said, yeah, this is the right path for me. This is going to give me meaning. This is going to make me who I want to be. And if it fails, I can fall back and I will get another job. I'm not going to be homeless, right? I'll be able to do something. Yeah. And once I did that and I stopped living for other people's expectations, I was able to build this practice in FemTech, the startup company, I have the first law firm that works exclusively with women's health innovators in the US. I was able to build that and have that freedom and just meet my own expectations.
Wow.
And that was so freeing. And it's funny because people look at me now and they honestly think a bit higher of me than they did when I had what I thought was it all.
Sure.
So my recommendation would be take the ego out of it. Don't care what other people say right now, right? Put all of that to the side and just think for a minute. If I do this, am I going to be happy? If this fails, will I be happy that I've at least tried it and not spend my life wondering if I didn't try it, what would happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you hit something so important there. And also the importance of taking away all of those prescribed methods, because I think law and medicine are in, finance, those old school, well-established establishments, in our country are very well known that you follow this track and you do this thing and you don't stray from it. And there's a lot of fear, like, what do you think? It's kind of around if you stray from it and all the things you've done to get there. But taking that away, like, what am I feeling? Because these people aren't asking me about my health scare, aren't asking me about my quality of life, aren't asking me, that's not what they're asking me. Where are my values at? What do I care about? What kind of life do I want to live? Where do I want to contribute? And you can take all those things out of it, and it doesn't mean it's easy, but it allows you to be more objective and truly listen to yourself and not get pulled back in. But that's hard. It's hard when you've invested all that time and space and money and all those things into that. But thank you for sharing that. I think that's really powerful. I think it's really interesting because there are still a lot of spaces that we run into in the country where there's expectations from your parents, your grandparents, your these spaces you grow up in, that you're going to go to work and you're going to go to college, you're going to get this degree, you're going to get this job so you can make money and have the life you want. And I think what I'm seeing more in my daughter's generation and your generation is, okay, that's good. I've got these skills, but I want to have a meaningful life. I don't want to make money so I can live on the weekend or the few hours a day. I want to, and so there's been a real shift here, but I've seen, like, through my daughter's experiences, these kids, they go to school with, they're on this track that they don't have any passion for. They don't have any, but it's their track to go on. If they want to live in this area of the country, they want to stay in this space, whatever that is. And having, so to kind of combat that and be, and then getting to these spaces 5-10 years later, I'm like, nope, this is still not working for me. And having to step back and make those decisions and having to kind of really take all of that and really look at yourself and your values and remove the ego and remove the fear, of all of that. I think that's such a big piece of it. So thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful. And I think that's, so, 20s, 30s, even 40s, some things that are out there. And even it's okay to listen to that intuition and make that shift when that's something that you're feeling called toward. It is, and it's okay to kind of buck the odds and go against the trends, because we've got to get rid of some of these old ideas that there's only one path to success. Well, you got to decide, what does success mean to you? It doesn't probably mean the same thing to you as it does a lot of these organizations that are still holding that up as their mantra, so to speak. So thank you for that. It's
interesting that you mentioned that too, right? Because there are times whenever you're going to take a leap that it's not going to work out, or it's not going to be what you thought it was. For me, that was being a law professor. I thought, and this is funny, right? I thought being a law professor was my dream job. I coveted that. I went after that with such passion, and I got it. And when I got it, right, and I was there, the bureaucracy that you have to deal with, I was a very good teacher, but I was not enjoying the actual bureaucracy and being a law professor and what all came with that.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me to reconcile with, right? Because I had convinced everyone this was my dream job. I was convinced it was my dream job.
Yeah.
And yet it just didn't feel right. And so for me, that was an experience where I tried it, and I'm so grateful I did. Because if I hadn't, I know I would still be chasing that today. I would say, this is going to be it. This is my ultimate dream job.
Yeah.
So doing that, realizing it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and saying, okay, I've tried that. It was great. And I'm moving on to something new.
Yeah.
That is totally fine. It's a learning opportunity. And you get the satisfaction of knowing you tried it instead of wishing your entire life that you had.
Yeah.
So I would say, right, if it doesn't work out, you're not going to regret having tried it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's as powerful as trying the thing and having it work, honestly, because it's that living, that never knowing, that what if your whole life that nags at you if you don't take that leap and try that. And my husband has worked in higher ed administration for 32 years. I hear you on the bureaucracy. Oh dear. I don't know how he does. I really don't know how he does it. I don't know how he does it. It's wild. We've lived all over the country and been all kinds of different, private, public, all the whole 9 yards. It is. And if you could just go in and do the job every day, it'd be like, this is great, but it's all that other stuff that has nothing to do with the job itself, but you have to navigate in order. So I hear, I'm veering off the track, but those are the things you don't always know about when you try something that you just don't know until you're into it. So thank you for that. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves, all those things that we do, those decisions we make, those experiences that happen to us that are part of our journey, that are part of our life, and they're not all pretty. And sometimes they're very hard, but getting to a point where you're able to accept that and sometimes heal and sometimes move forward, but loving yourself and embracing your life through it. Because you've had some tough stuff you've talked about already that you've had to navigate. And the layers piece can be difficult. So talk to me about your layers journey.
Yeah, it's a great question because there are so many different aspects that you deal with in your professional world, right? In your personal world, and trying to find that balance is hard. And you're inevitably going to do something, right, that you're not proud of, right? Or that didn't turn out the way that you thought it would. For me, I am somebody who is a perfectionist. And so I dwell on every single thing that I do wrong or that doesn't go right. Even if there was nothing I could have really done to change it or improve the outcome, right, I still see that as a failure. And for so long, I kind of hid those failure layers where I wouldn't have to think about them and where I wouldn't have to actually grapple with them. And I will say, coming into the journey of entrepreneurship has really redefined how I deal with those failure layers, because as an entrepreneur, you are dealing with failure every single day. Yeah. And if you're not,
especially in this new industry that you're in.
Right.
Oh my gosh, you try new things all the time. Not everything's going to work.
All the time. Exactly. And if it does all work, right, you're doing something wrong because it shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. That's your first red flag.
The first red flag. So it has really taught me, A, not to take that so personally, right? But B, there's so many lessons in failure. Instead of being ashamed of it, I look at it now as much more of a learning opportunity and an opportunity to pivot than I did before, where I would say that is a failure. That is a black mark on me as a person, and nobody's ever going to love me with that failure, right? Or with that black mark. Instead, now I look and say, what did I learn from that? How can I improve on that? How can I pivot so that I can continue to serve the people I'm trying to serve? So that's kind of one big layer aspect. The other kind of layer aspect that I've had to deal with a lot is personal life. And unfortunately, right, we have a lot of elderly individuals in our family, and they've been dealing with a lot of health issues lately. And so trying to find, how do I as a person deal with all of that trauma, right, or death or illness that's happening around me while still trying to be professional on calls without having to cancel calls and meetings all the time to deal with that type of stuff. How do I do that? How do I make peace with the fact that I have all of these family obligations? And I'm going to be unavailable sometimes, or I'm going to have to change that meeting time. How do I make peace with that? That has been hard, right? Because I want to dedicate myself 100% to my business and my clients and the women out there.
Sure.
And so that layer is hard sometimes to accept when you have to realize other things might come first before you're able to give it your 100% all.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And finding acceptance for that layer as well and saying it's life. I always apologize for it. And a lot of people say, I understand, right? This XYZ happened to me 5 years ago, right? Or 10 minutes ago. So I find that it actually brings people closer to tell them, right, kind of what's going on in your life instead of trying to keep everything secret and bottled up in its own separate layer. So I've started to do that more as well. So those would say are 2 layers that I have found challenging and how I'm trying to cope with them.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because different seasons expose different things. But it's that doing it together and not doing these things in isolation and not stuffing them. They'll come back to haunt you if you do. They're not going away. So it's that figuring out. But thank you for sharing that, because those are and you got to navigate and find space. And I think as women, we apologize for everything under the sun. So also finding different language around that. It's like, thanks so much for reaching out. This has come up, so I'm not going to be able to show up in this way. We'll reschedule instead of apologizing for your life, and I think, and that's a lesson that we all have to learn too. But thanks for sharing. Because so many times, these things will come up. I'm like, you know what? Take that space. Me too. If these people, if they don't understand it, it's just probably either something they haven't learned how to deal with their own layers yet. They haven't navigated it yet. That's not a reflection on you. You following your heart and listening to what you need to do is always going to be the right thing to do, and being okay with that too. So talk to me about in living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, which you have done through this journey that we talked about, and how you're getting into this important work that you're doing for women and that you followed your heart and your values to get to. How has that affected your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with the other people in your life?
Oh, I love this question. I am 100% happier than I have ever been in my life. And I think that comes from a couple of different aspects. The first is shedding some of the stress, right? Because now in entrepreneurship, I am in control. And even though I don't work any less hard than I did before or fewer hours, what I have found is that I'm not being controlled. And for me, that was a huge source of stress, was not having that control over my time and what I was doing and always being at someone's beck and call. Yeah. And so that flexibility added just so much happiness to my life. So that was really important to me. The other things I would say too is, being able to feel fulfilled and doing something that I love, where I feel like I'm giving back and making a difference, has also contributed substantially to my happiness. And, I feel like an entirely different person than the one who emerged from law school and was sitting behind a desk in a Charlotte office, drilling and, banging their head against the wall because they're doing financial services and litigation work. Where you come home every day and all you want to do is go to sleep because you don't want to think about what's coming up next, right? Or you want to watch a movie to kind of escape into fantasy land. So I find that I'm able now to be a lot more present. I'm able to take calls and actually get my personality back, right? And be engaging with people. And I'm always able to think and make my own choices, which has just been phenomenal. It's something I wouldn't have been able to do several years ago. So I feel like a totally different person. I feel like one who is prioritizing her health now, focusing on all the things the doctors tell us to do, right? And the healthy living, healthy boundary setting. And it's a work in progress, but compared to where I was, 3 or 4 years ago, if you compare those two individuals, they're entirely different. And to the point where other people have even commented, gee, Bethany's a lot happier, right? Bethany seems so much less stressed. She seems like a different person. That's how much of an impact it can make when you choose to follow your passion and live authentically, rather than trying to conform to what society thinks you should be doing, or trying to navigate a life that's not really in line with your values. So I am so thrilled where I am. I feel the happiest that I have been, and I'm hoping, to continue on this journey.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. That was so good. I feel like that was like a textbook, like take that, people. Maybe it's more that, that is your big takeaway from today. It's exactly what she said right there. Thank you so much for that. So good. We are down to the rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Oh, I love that. So I would say exercise, traveling, photography. I will say napping. It's not just for kids. Love to nap.
No. And that 4-year-old that doesn't want to nap, I'm like, you are going to wish you could do this someday.
And then I would say playing with my dogs. Those are the 5 things that just nourish me and bring me back.
I love that. All right. And 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Yeah, I want to feel healthy. I want to feel empowered. I want to feel inspired to take women's health to the next level. I want to feel educated on myself and my body and women's health as well. And I want to feel committed to giving back and to making others understand what this field is.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, so good. All right. So all this information is going to be on our resources page, but tell us right now while you're with us, how people can find you, follow you, learn about this, be involved, all those things. You just had a big launch this week. So talk about all that.
Yes. So we just had our launch of our FemInnovator community, which is really where anyone, whether you're a founder, a clinician, a scientist, an investor, or just someone who wants to test out women's health products or a patient advocate, where you can come and get involved. We're trying to bring the entire women's health ecosystem under one roof to have these conversations. So please join our patient advocacy council. It's free and you get to work with founders and get paid for your expertise in order to give them product feedback. And it's a great place to learn about FemTech and the resources that are out there. So you can learn more at FemInnovation.com. And you can find me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can go to linkedin.com/in/Bethany Corbin. And I'm also on Instagram. I joke I'm a grandma on Instagram because I just got into it this year. But you can find me at FemTech Lawyer on Instagram.
Okay, great. And are you still doing the podcast too, correct?
Yes. We have the FemInnovation podcast. Yeah. It is a mix of educating women on the new technologies that are coming out and giving female founders the tools that they need to go and build companies.
Yes, I love it. So good. So good. And you can find that on all your normal platforms. And yes, that will all be available on our resources page at embracinglayers.com as well. Bethany, thank you so much for this time today, for this peek into your story and this a fountain of information and how you got there. I love the story of how you got there. I love getting to know people's passions and their values. And when they align, they take all those things they've learned from and align. So much to learn here. Field podcast audience, if this is new information to you, you're not alone. So check out these resources, see how you can be involved, inform yourself, ask your doctors those questions. If you're a nurse practitioner or a doctor or nurse or any caregiver of any kind, and you haven't heard about this, go to this website, find out how you can get engaged with this information. This is how we get these products and these resources out here and available to women, and make them part of the conversation and taking the stigmas so that people can put this information out on social media and not be blocked. I mean, those are those things too. And the more of us that are talking about it and normalizing the conversations, we can do that together. But Bethany, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been such a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, y'all, go get informed, find out what's out there for you. Let's move this along. Let's get us out here as women the care and the resources that we need. And get involved in this. This is very important in moving this needle. So glad we were able to bring you this information today. Take good care of yourselves and have a great week.